In the world of drug cartels, power does not care about age. Some of the people who have held the reins of billion-dollar empires, commanded armies of gunmen, and flooded nations with narcotics, were barely old enough to drive when they started, and some of them started killing even before that. So let's go through the youngest cartel bosses in the world. In December 2010, Mexican soldiers detained a boy at an airport in Cuernavaca, in the state of Morelos. He was trying to board a flight to Tijuana with his sister. He was small, curly-haired, skinny. He was 14 years old. His name was Edgar Jimenez Lugo, known as El Ponchis, and he worked for the South Pacific Drug Cartel in Morelos State outside Mexico City. He had been captured while trying to flee to the United States. What happened next stunned Mexico and the entire world. Jimenez shocked observers when he told authorities that he had begun killing people after being kidnapped at age 11. He told police in the central Mexican state of Morelos that his extreme acts, he was found guilty of slitting the throats of 4 people, were done out of fear for his own life and other inducements, including being paid $200 a week. At just 11 years old, Edgar Jimenez Lugo, El Ponchis, was the first case of child hitman known and documented in Mexico. He was not a boss in the traditional sense. He was something more disturbing, a child given the authority to torture and execute, running a small crew of young people who distributed cocaine on the streets of Morelos. His story is the entry point into a world most people cannot fathom, an ecosystem where youth is not a shield, but a weapon. Julio de Jesus Rodilla Hernandez, alias El Negro, a leader in the Cartel del Pacifico Sur, befriended Ponchis and was persistent in recruiting the youngster. Negro had dated an older sister of the boy. He was lured by what was a fortune to Ponchis. He was added to their ranks. They paid him $2,500 to execute. Videos surfaced on YouTube. He could be seen in videos cutting the neck of his victims, hitting another, and posing next to a corpse. The footage circulated online, and it was this digital trail that helped the Mexican military locate him. This particular cell liked to upload photos on the internet to show off their weapons, drugs, cars, and the brutality they inflict on their rivals. However, it was this habit that led investigators to discovering the location of one of the cell's whereabouts. A Mexican court found him guilty of torturing and beheading at least 4 people, and kidnapping 3 others as an operative for the South Pacific Cartel. He received the maximum sentence allowed under Mexican law for minors, 3 years. The teenager's age, 14 at the time, and his on-camera description of the slayings brought international attention to the case. Analysts said the dramatic example showed how Mexican drug gangs were increasingly recruiting youths, and El Ponchis was not alone. A 13-year-old boy who had confessed to being an assassin for a Mexican drug cartel was among 6 people found murdered execution-style, authorities in the central Mexican state of Zacatecas confirmed. The boy, identified as Jose Armando Moreno Leos by officials, was arrested only 3 weeks before. After being detained, he confessed to authorities that he had participated in at least 10 homicides, and that he was somebody who was good at shooting with a high-caliber weapon. Organized crime analyst Jose Luis Pinheiro told Homeland Security today, "The most obvious change I see is that those being recruited as hitmen or hired assassins are young people. Very young people who are unemployed and poor or drug addicts. They're not professional assassins, and they don't have particular knowledge of how to use weapons." He added, "They're disposable. They're recyclable. They're hired for an average of US $500 to $650 a month to kill an unlimited number of people." This was the landscape. This was the soil from which young cartel figures sprouted. And while El Ponchis represented the expendable end of the spectrum, other young men were born directly into the command structure, and their trajectories led to places far more powerful. If El Ponchis was a child dragged into cartel life from poverty, the sons of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman represent the opposite extreme. Children raised inside one of the wealthiest and most powerful criminal organizations in history, groomed from boyhood to inherit it. Several sons of the now jailed former Sinaloa cartel leader, Joaquin Guzman Loera, alias El Chapo, have emerged among the most influential criminal groups in Mexico. Joaquin Guzman Lopez, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, and Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, known collectively as the Chapitos, have become increasingly influential in the synthetic drug trade and other criminal economies in North and Western Mexico. Ovidio, Ivan, and Jesus Alfredo were apparently brought into the Sinaloa cartel's criminal operations at a young age as teenagers by their father and another top Sinaloa cartel figure, Ismael Zambada Garcia, alias El Mayo. In order to learn the ins and outs of the organization, they began to assume a more prominent role in the mid to late 2010s, around the time their father was arrested and extradited to the United States. Think about that for a moment. These were teenagers being tutored in the logistics of international drug smuggling by two of the most wanted men on earth. Ivan Archivaldo grew up in a life of privilege, but was always closely tied to the cartel world. He and his brothers, Jesus Alfredo, Ovidio, and Joaquin Guzman Lopez, were constantly exposed to their father's criminal empire. Frequent visits to prisons such as La Palma and Puente Grande, where El Chapo was treated with deference, shaped the young Guzman's view of power and control. Their father's trajectory had been meteoric and violent. El Chapo studied up to 3rd grade, but he left school and found employment in marijuana smuggling organizations. By 1980, he had joined a smuggling organization run by Pedro Avilés, the Lion of Sinaloa. From teenage driver to the leader of one of the most powerful drug trafficking operations the world has ever seen. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the Sinaloa cartel, under the leadership of figures like Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, significantly expanded its operations, establishing itself as one of the most powerful and influential criminal organizations in the world. And when El Chapo was finally extradited to the United States in January 2017, his sons stepped forward to fill the void. By 2019, after El Chapo's extradition and conviction in the U.S., Ivan and his brothers took over much of the operations of the Sinaloa cartel. This new generation, unlike the original founders, has adapted to the modern world, focusing on the production and distribution of synthetic drugs like fentanyl, a substance responsible for hundreds of thousands of overdose deaths in the world. Ivan's control over these operations has made him a pivotal figure in the cartel. According to experts in Mexico's organized crime, the emerging leader of both the faction Los Chapitos and the Sinaloa cartel as a whole is Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, one of the two sons El Chapo had with Maria Alejandrina Salazar Hernandez, his first wife. He is also considered one of the cruelest. The Chapitos were not content to simply inherit. They fought for dominance, internally and externally. In October 2019, Mexican security forces launched a poorly planned operation to capture Ovidio in the Sinaloa state capital of Culiacan. Shortly after word of Ovidio's detention spread, Sinaloa cartel members responded in force, swarming the city and launching an all-out offensive to demand his release. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador ultimately ordered that the operation be stopped and that the presumed criminal be set free. A sovereign government forced to release a cartel boss because his organization held an entire city hostage. That was the power the Chapitos wielded, and they were barely in their 30s when it happened. After their notoriety rose significantly through 2021 and 2022, the Chapitos suffered a blow in January 2023 when Ovidio was arrested in Culiacan. Following his arrest, much like in 2019, blockades were set up across the city and other parts of Sinaloa, with cartel gunmen taking shots at police and army troops and even bringing down a military helicopter. Within hours, the federal government sent in reinforcements to calm the situation. While Ovidio was not released this time, this action proved the rapid mobilization and response capacity of the Sinaloa cartel on their own turf. Guzman Salazar and his family are believed to be in a leadership battle with the Zambada Siqueiros faction since 2024, which has led to the deaths of nearly 2,000 people, according to El País. 2,000 people dead because of a power struggle between factions led, on one side, by young men who grew up visiting their father in prison. The Chapitos represent a chilling evolution in cartel succession, the professionalization of inheritance. They were taught the trade as children. They seized power as young men, and they reshaped the Sinaloa cartel's entire business model around synthetic drugs. This faction, driven by a younger and more aggressive generation of drug traffickers, has adapted their operations to focus on the lucrative synthetic drug market. Fentanyl, in particular, has become their primary commodity, with the cartel importing chemical precursors from China to manufacture the deadly opioid in clandestine labs across Mexico. And still, Ivan Archivaldo, the one many consider the true heir to El Chapo's throne, remains at large. Ivan Guzman Salazar and his brother Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar continue to share leadership roles in the Sinaloa cartel and its fentanyl trafficking operations. The U.S. Department of State is offering a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the arrest and/or conviction of either brother. There was a teenage farmer in the mountains of Sinaloa who started growing marijuana at the age of 14. At the age of 14, he started growing marijuana in his native Badiraguato, Sinaloa, the birthplace of another of Mexico's biggest drug traffickers, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Rafael Caro Quintero. The name itself carries a weight that few in the cartel world can match. Like other drug lords, Caro Quintero justified his incursion into crime on the grounds of poverty and lack of opportunities. "I was an orphan. My father died. I was 14 years old and I had to feed my brothers. That's how it all started," he told Proceso magazine in 2016. By the time he was in his mid-20s, Caro Quintero had moved from cultivating patches of marijuana in the mountains to co-founding one of the most consequential criminal organizations in Mexican history. Rafael Caro Quintero, born October 24, 1952, is a Mexican former drug lord who co-founded the now disintegrated Guadalajara cartel with Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo and other drug traffickers in the late 1970s. At the end of the 1970s, Caro Quintero allied with Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo in what was known as the Guadalajara cartel. This was the organization that in many ways gave birth to every major Mexican cartel that exists today. The Sinaloa cartel, the Tijuana cartel, the Juarez cartel, they all trace their lineage directly back to the federation that Caro Quintero helped build as a young man. The Guadalajara cartel is one of the 5 most famous drug cartels in history, as it was among the first to work with and significantly prosper from the cocaine trade started in Colombia. That was the critical pivot from marijuana to cocaine, and Caro Quintero was there at the beginning, engineering massive plantation operations that dwarfed anything Mexico had seen before. His downfall came from one of the most infamous events in the history of the war on drugs. He was responsible for the kidnapping and torture of United States Drug Enforcement Administration agent Enrique Kiki Camarena, Camarena's pilot Alfredo Zavala Avalar, the American writer John Clay Walker, and dentistry student Alberto Radalat in 1985. Between 1982 and 1984, Kiki Camarena, a U.S. agent of Mexican origin, infiltrated the cartel, resulting in the seizure and destruction of a 2,500-acre marijuana plantation at a hacienda known as the Rancho Buffalo in the northern state of Chihuahua. According to U.S. authorities, in his desire for revenge against the DEA, Caro Quintero ordered the torture and death of Camarena. The murder of a DEA agent cracked open the entire apparatus. After the murders, Caro Quintero fled to Costa Rica, but later that year was arrested and extradited to Mexico, where he was sentenced to 40 years in prison for murder. Following his arrest, the Guadalajara cartel disintegrated, and its leaders were incorporated into the Tijuana cartel, Sinaloa cartel, and Juarez cartel. Caro Quintero had started at 14. By his early 30s, he had co-founded an empire and watched it crumble, all because of a decision that would haunt him for 4 decades. After serving 28 years in prison, Caro Quintero was freed in August 2013, after a state court concluded that he had been tried improperly. But freedom did not last. Caro Quintero was arrested in the settlement of San Simón, within the Xua municipality of Sinaloa, on July 15, 2022, and then in a dramatic final chapter, on February 27, 2025, the Mexican government extradited Caro Quintero and 28 other drug cartel figures to the United States to face criminal charges there. Caro Quintero would then be arraigned in a New York federal court in Brooklyn on February 28, 2025. During his arraignment, Caro Quintero entered a plea of not guilty to charges of running a criminal enterprise and murdering DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena. From a 14-year-old orphan tending marijuana plants in the mountains to one of the most wanted men in the world, finally standing trial in a Brooklyn courtroom at the age of 72. That is the arc of Rafael Caro Quintero, the Empress and the New Breed. The story of young cartel power is not limited to men. Claudia Ochoa Felix, born January 15, 1987, was a social media personality. In 2014, a rumor spread on social media that she was a high-ranking leader of the murder squad Los Antrax, a block of enforcers that operate as an armed wing of the Sinaloa cartel. She was 27 when the rumors first surfaced. Claudia Ochoa Felix, a 27-year-old Mexican woman, often noted in media reports for her close resemblance to U.S. celebrity Kim Kardashian, was thought to be the glamorous new leader of a powerful drug cartel hit squad. Photos posted by Felix on social media sites Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram show her lifestyle of seemingly limitless money, expensive clothing, and her personalized pink AK-47 assault rifle. Nicknamed the Empress of Antrax, she was thought to now lead the Los Antrax hit squad, used by the Sinaloa crime cartel to carry out assassinations and attacks, and also protect gangster boss Ismael El Mayo Zambada, a woman in her late 20s, allegedly commanding a squad of assassins responsible for protecting one of the most powerful drug lords alive. It is reported in various local media that after the arrest of Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa, also known as El Chino Antrax in Amsterdam earlier that year, Claudia Ochoa Felix became the alleged leader of the group of assassins called Los Antrax. This group is the armed wing of the Sinaloa cartel, the deadly cartel formerly led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Reports said she was married to a drug trafficker with the Sinaloa cartel, nicknamed El Chavo Felix, with whom she had 3 children. However, she denied any allegations of organized crime involvement, sharing on Twitter at the time that the reports were cowardly lies and slander. Her rise illustrated something broader about the evolution of cartel culture. Those following the evolution of cartels in the country were noticing a demographic shift. One headline from the Houston Chronicle summarized it: "Ruthless but charming female members are taking over Mexico's drug cartels." But there was a counterpoint. In some ways, I think this is the media taking an opportunity to sell copy, because they know that sex sells. Nathan Jones, professor at Sam Houston State University, said, "But in other cases, it's something else. Organized crime in Mexico has diversified beyond drug trafficking, into local extortion, into oil theft, many other criminal activities." Whether she truly ran Los Antrax or not, her story ended in darkness. The 35-year-old died of a suspected pulmonary aspiration. She was found dead in a home in Isla Musala, in the city of Culiacan, Mexico. According to local media, she died during the night of a suspected pulmonary aspiration. However, it has not been confirmed whether she was the victim of foul play, or if it was an accidental death. Many people began to rumor online that Felix had been assassinated due to her affiliations with the infamous Los Antrax squad and the Sinaloa cartel. She died at 32. Whether she was truly a cartel boss, a social media figure caught up in a dangerous world, or something in between, her trajectory showed that the cartel universe was pulling in younger faces, including women, and giving them platforms of terrifying power. Her story sits alongside a broader pattern. The Tijuana cartel, once considered one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Mexico, eventually fell under the leadership of a woman as well. Heading the Tijuana cartel is Enadina Arellano Felix, who took over from her brothers in 2008, after most of them ended up captured or killed. Felix was born into a family of narcos and has been in the business her whole life. As the final holdout, Felix is keeping the family trade afloat from behind the scenes, and she remains a fugitive from the law. The pattern is clear. As the older generation falls, arrested, extradited, or killed, youth fills the vacuum. Whether that youth comes in the form of a child soldier on the streets of Morelos, a billionaire's son in Culiacan, or a social media personality with a pink assault rifle. The endless cycle. Every name in this story tells the same fundamental truth. The cartel system is designed to regenerate. When Pablo Escobar was killed in 1993, born December 1, 1949, he was a Colombian drug lord who rose to infamy as the leader of the Medellin cartel, overseeing a period marked by extreme violence, corruption, and wealth. Escobar was arguably the world's most powerful drug trafficker in the 1980s and early 90s. At the height of its power, the Medellin cartel dominated the cocaine trade, earning an estimated $420 million a week, and making Escobar one of the wealthiest people in the world. His criminal career had also started remarkably young. While still a teenager, he began a life of crime. His early illegal activities included selling fake diplomas, smuggling stereo equipment, and stealing tombstones to resell. Escobar also stole cars, and it was this offense that resulted in his first arrest in 1974. After Escobar's death, the power of the Colombian cartels was declining, partly because of the deaths of various drug lords and the U.S. crackdown on drug trafficking in the Caribbean. As Mexico gained popularity as a drug route, the strength of its criminal organizations grew. The old guard falls. A new generation rises, and each new generation starts younger. An increasingly disturbing factor in the vicious violence that is plaguing Mexico is the youthfulness of the individuals involved, whether as assassins or victims. There is no doubt that the great majority of the rank and file of Mexico's organized crime groups are young men in their 20s, and increasingly in their teens. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the organization that now rivals Sinaloa for supremacy, is a key supplier of illicit fentanyl to the United States, and one of Mexico's most powerful, influential, and ruthless transnational criminal organizations. Forming around 2011 out of the remnants of the Sinaloa cartel-affiliated Milenio Cartel, CJNG has become independent from key members linked by blood ties or marriage to the Gonzalez Valencia money laundering organization known as Los Queenies. Its leader, Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes, was killed during an operation to arrest him in the western state of Jalisco in February 2026. In the aftermath of Oseguera's death, armed cartel members launched attacks across the country, with gunmen blocking highways and torching cars. And with El Mencho dead, El Mayo in a U.S. prison, El Chapo serving a life sentence, and Caro Quintero awaiting trial in Brooklyn, who is left? Zambada Siqueiros is a leader within the Sinaloa cartel's La Maiza faction, and son of longtime trafficker Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Since his father's arrest in 2024, Zambada Siqueiros has emerged as one of the cartel's key figures in controlling drug distribution and narcotics networks that supply the U.S. Sons, nephews, protégés, the next generation. Always younger, always ready. In February 2025, the Trump administration designated these cartels foreign terrorist organizations. The pressure is mounting from every direction: militaries, intelligence agencies, international law enforcement. And yet the system persists, because the economics have not changed, because the demand has not changed, and because, in communities ravaged by poverty and violence, the cartel is still the only employer offering a paycheck. The youngest cartel bosses in the world are not anomalies. They are symptoms. From El Ponchis, recruited at 11, to Los Chapitos, groomed as teenagers, to Caro Quintero, growing marijuana at 14 in the mountains. Youth has always been the lifeblood of the cartel machine. The faces change. The names change. The ages keep getting lower. And every time a kingpin falls, the question is never if someone younger will replace them. It's how young they'll be.